Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Growing up, I never really liked magazines. I gotta be really honest. I was not one of those girls that looked at magazines of celebrities and looked at their bodies and really cared very much. That was just not me. It was just not part of something that I did growing up. Although I did have a lot of friends who did, and I could see what it did to them every time, especially when you're going through, puberty and late adolescence, and as you're kind of still filling out in your body in that period of life. It takes such a toll when you look at these women and you go, oh my God, that's what beauty looks like. And I don't look like that. I remember thinking, well, just stop looking at the magazines and it'll be all better. And my life lesson came then after I had my son. Now, my postpartum experience was very different than typical postpartum experiences, but it did open my eyes to how easy it is to compare bodies, body shape, body sizes, body function after a baby's born. And I remember thinking back to that day going, oh, now I see what was going on with my friends. It's not as simple as just turning away or putting the magazine away or looking away. It's not that simple. And I gained a lot of empathy and understanding in that time because it's like the messages are not just in the magazines or on TV or on radio or on podcasts or anything like that or on social media. It is, the messages are everywhere, imbued in every word that comes out of most conversations postpartum about what your body should look like, what your body should be able to do, and how fast it should be able to do that. And it's exhausting and it's so demoralizing. And I remember feeling that going, how do we change this to make this more supportive? Because I knew I shouldn't be comparing. I knew that. I had my friends reminding me of that. I knew that, but I couldn't stop. And so it wasn't until recently when I noticed celebrities were starting to show real postpartum bodies that it hit me how important it is for us to actually be very honest about what this experience is actually like. The first one that really stood out to me, and maybe I'm super late in the game and it's possible more people have done this before that, but the one that really stood out to me was Peta Murgatroyd, who shared a while back, it's been a while now, about her postpartum body a few days after delivery and a few weeks after delivery. And she still had a belly. She was not this flat-bellied, photoshopped cover of a magazine type of body. And that was really striking because she's a dancer and she's somebody who is in the media all the time. And her body shape and her body size is very important to the work that she does. And I remember how many people were just like, thank God you did this. Thank you for sharing. And more recently, I've been following Tia Mowry, if you remember from Sister Sister from way back in the day, that show. And she's been showing what her postpartum experience looks like, not just her body, but just in general, how crazy it is to have a brand new baby at home. And it's been so refreshing, especially in light of all the messages that are already out there. But then, you compare that to, say, Princess Kate Middleton, and how she has to just show up so beautiful and glam after her baby's born. And people are tired of it. We're tired. What does it really look like? What does it really feel like to have a baby? And let's be real about this. And that is why we're having today's episode and why I'm so excited that Rebecca Scritchfield is here, because we need to make this real. We need to make this real. We need to have this real conversation of what is it actually like after you have a baby, and how do you help yourself heal? And it's not just physically. It really matters how you consider and accept and see your new body. Rebecca Scritchfield is an award-winning health at every size dietitian and exercise physiologist. She's author of the book Body Kindness, Never Say Diet Again. Yes! And host of the Body Kindness podcast. She has a free anti-diet get started course at bodykindnessbook.com And she provides one-on-one counseling, virtual support groups, workshops, e-courses, and more. And she's basically really amazing. And I'm so excited to have her here. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Before we get started, though, I would love to know a little bit about your story and how you became interested in doing work around postpartum body image.
Well, I think if I could just give the short version of the story, is it really started when I tried my first diet as around 9 years old and, had this whole journey for years. And, there was highs and lows of my emotional well-being and how I viewed health throughout that process. But very interestingly, so I have two young girls who are 6 and 4. And when I became pregnant, I was at a point where I wasn't dieting and I had made the best peace with my body and body image, but there was a history there and I didn't know the gender. And I just kept saying, it's a boy, it's a boy. And I think part of me was just afraid to have a girl, knowing what I grew up having to deal with.
Totally get that.
And it was a girl. So that was really a transformative point. Like I remember thinking, break the chain, this idea that I knew I wasn't going to be perfect and I wasn't going to expect myself to be perfect, but that knowing how kids' opinions and belief systems are formed and that part of it is our culture, but part of it is in what is modeled in the home. I just felt like one of the best ways I could make meaning out of my difficulty in my life was to work on breaking the chain from what happened with me to my daughters. And when I wrote Body Kindness, my girls were about 4 and 2, I guess, like somewhere, maybe even a little bit younger. Actually, it was like several years ago. It takes forever to get a book out. That's the bottom line.
Yes, it does.
What do you mean? It's came out in 2017, which isn't really that long ago, but I was writing it in 2015. And so I was in it. And it's not like I had this idea, like, I'm going to write a book called Body Kindness. I had a different idea for a book. It was similar, non-diet. It was about like, you don't need to lose weight to be happy. Like you need to make time for yourself. And like, the structure of it was there, but I feel like when I compare the two, it was a little bit more superficial because it was more like, oh, just try self-love, almost like that Pollyanna kind of thing. And then I had my kids and what I was realizing was I was slipping into old criticisms and judgments and shame. I didn't have the time to do the pre-baby exercise. So that's, why I sucked for the day, right? But lacking sleep and deciding to take a nap instead of, do a complicated meal,
Totally.
That would be a criticism. And so I was actually going through the experience of kind of, I guess, like failing at motherhood, like self-care wasn't good enough. What I was doing as a mother wasn't good enough. And I really thought I had left that all behind. I mean, it's like, I'm the expert. I was like, do I need to go down into my own office and like sit on the couch for myself? And, and I could laugh about it, but honestly, that's a lot of what I did in Body Kindness.
Yes.
My husband actually said, I know that you have a wisdom for what you need right now to be kind to yourself and to focus on your well-being. And this is what you're writing about. And so he was very kind and generous and just said, dig deeper, pretend like you are helping a client out or helping a friend out and give yourself that same advice. And that night he had the kids and I sat down and I wrote what is part of the book. It's a Body Kindness Manifesto that's early on in the book. And it was just this checklist of things that I valued and things that mattered. And like I don't have to do everything at once. And just these affirmations that made me feel good. And I ended up emailing my editor and I said, I'm really feeling a strong pull to write something deeper than kind of like, here's a bunch of ideas, do this or that. And she asked me to send her some pages. And within a week, I had basically what was the first chapter of Body Kindness. And I still didn't know what we would call it. She's like, well, this all is great. We have to give it a name. And we had this sort of list of important principles. And I was like, well, if I could not keep anything but one thing, what would I keep? And the one that I kept was be kind to your body. And I was like, what about body kindness? And I was like, oh, that's a bad idea. And then my editor was like, so what are you thinking? And I basically said the same thing to her. And I was like, the only one I want to keep is be kind to your body. Like I could not let that one go. And she goes, oh, what about body kindness? And I was like, oh my gosh, we have it. That must be it because exactly.
That's it. It's done.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to share that story because I think a lot of people, oh, well, this is an expert and she has it all together. And so, and it's the exact thing you talked about in the opening. We do compare and despair, right? Like social comparison. Oh, well, she has it all together, but I can't do it because blah, 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 And so I wanted to share that in the opening and kind of a response to what you were saying, because we all do that. We all do that comparison and we put other people like on a pedestal. We compare up. And we use it as a reason to beat ourselves up of like, this is why I'm not good enough. This is evidence of my unworthiness. And that actually leads to what I talk about in body kindness called a downward spiral, where you're more closed off, isolated, disconnected from the very world and feelings and even yourself, the very things you need to feel good, you're disassociated from. And so I really want listeners to know that no matter where you're at, it's absolutely okay to be exactly where you are. But it's also okay to get better and it's okay to evolve and to really reframe what it means to focus on your well-being and not your weight, shape, or appearance. And especially as you are going into this new stage in your life where it's so much more matters to you. And it really is time to let go of our cultural expectations of what it means to be healthy and reframe that and take back that power for ourselves.
I love that. I love how empowering that message is. And I love how important that is. And you and I were talking just now about how critical this message is. And we can't overstate that because we don't get that message in other places. And so I'm curious, where do you think the push for this unrealistic postpartum body image comes from? Because I was thinking about this actually a few days ago. I hadn't thought about this memory in so long, but I remember when I was in graduate school, there was a class one day where a guest lecturer had come in and was talking about body image. And there was they'd brought in so many different visuals of what women's ideal women body type looked like from the last several hundred years to now. And it's just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And what do you think? Where is this coming from? Why has this changed? And what is perpetuating this unrealistic expectation for our postpartum bodies?
Sure. Well, we'll do the highlights version of it, but the fact of the matter is and I'm going to use the word fat, and I just want to let listeners know that I use it as a way, it's a neutral descriptor, just like height, tall or short. The word is used in our culture as a way to criticize people. But then, when you say words like overweight, it's like, well, over what weight? So when I use the word fat,
I love that.
It's to neutralize it as a way as part of somebody's identity. So we've always had fat people in the world. And in fact, it was idolized. It was a sign of fertility and health and well-being. And to your point in your college experience, they can note changes over time. Going to the most recent history, it's really wrapped up in things like the patriarchy and white supremacy, to be honest. And without kind of going super deep in that. Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
It's a whole thing. But suffice it to say that women were traded off as property, right? I mean, we couldn't get credit cards till the 1970s.
Right.
So again, in our recent history, I like to take it back to the bathroom scale. And this is not when dieting started. So it's believed that the first diet book was written by a male, of course, but it was a letter on corpulence. And it's funny when you actually look at it, because of course for that time, it sold all these copies, right? It's the original bestseller. And it was like, I drink alcohol and I don't exercise and I just do this and that. And I lost 50 pounds and you can too, right? So like the formula is there and it just, nothing changes. It's just, that phrase, you can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. Like that is literally today's diet culture. It just gets harder and harder and harder to disentangle. right? But like we can look at something like the bathroom scale. And this literally wasn't a thing. There was something called a penny scale where people could put a penny in like the early 1900s. They'd be on the way to the movies, put a penny and jump it on and see a number and be like, oh, isn't this a cute, fun, like a trick? But they made all this money, but there was no scale in the homes of the bathrooms, right? And then they figured out the technology, but they needed to create a need for it. So they hired advertisers, and they basically, one of the first advertising campaigns in the US was, it's called the Healthometer. It's a company that's still around today. And it literally has this white woman holding a coffee mug, like in her bathrobe on this scale, like with a, shocked look on her face. And it says things like, for health, happiness, success, and beauty, weigh yourself every day. And then
Holy
had
cow.
this, oh yeah, it's awful. It's awful. They had this message from like, oh, the New York Society of Health supports this. I mean, just the roots of it in like the early 1900s. And it just devolved from there. And so it was basically all upholding, which is our present societal expectation that women are supposed to be thin, we're supposed to be nice, and we're supposed to use all our available resources on our appearance. So like we grow up in this world where this is normalized, but it's a cultural expectation. So for my higher weight friends listening, it's like the reality is it does suck to be you. It sucks to be in a larger body, whether that's from chronic dieting, eating disorder, natural genetics. There's any number of reasons. But in today's day and age, our culture will look at you and make assumptions. And that's called body oppression or weight stigma. They'll assume that you must be exercising in order to lose weight because, of course, you want to change your appearance, or that you must be a beginner in the exercise, or you must be lazy and eat pizza and bonbons. And it's these judgments. And so like, as long as we have this culture that's out there saying like fat is bad and fat people are bad, we will always have a diet culture, $60+ billion a year of, built on shame, built on oppression. So, you can really think of this no matter what level of work you have to do, you're in your postpartum window. And even if you really, really, really want to lose weight, that it's okay to feel those feelings, because of course, look at our culture that says, who you are if you don't, put all their effort into your appearance. But you can absolutely find better health and well-being by rejecting diet culture. And body kindness is my answer for doing that. And it's grounded in positive psychology. It's grounded in mindfulness and a type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is based in research to help improve your well-being. And it really has to do with stopping following all the external rules, right? Today's diets of like Whole30 and paleo and keto and all those things, even Weight Watchers is still out there, right? But it's about rejecting all that and reframing kind of what you want to do for your health and well-being. And I would say in the postpartum period, it's also working with your body's natural, trend after having a baby. So you started talking about like the celebrity expectations of like back to her pre-baby body from 6 weeks ago, like knowing that none of that is real and rejecting that. And even if you wish your postpartum body looked different, fully committing to self-care and enhancing your well-being, not body shame.
You just dropped like 40,000 truth bombs in the last couple minutes.
I finished the podcast. We're done.
And done. This is fantastic because, the biggest thing that I took away from this is what you just, ended with, which is let's reject what's out there. Yes, it's out there. And yes, ideally it'd be great if we could get rid of that. But since we may not be able to, and especially, that number is staggering, $60 billion year industry. That's a pretty huge monster to try to tackle. So let's start internally and let's say I, as an individual, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to let that come into my world. I'm not going to let that come into my life, my health, and I'm going to take charge and do what's right for me. And I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my feeling is where that begins is really tapping into your own body, listening to what your body needs and going from there, as opposed to listening to everybody else on the outside and then figuring out what works for you.
Yeah, that is 100%. So there's 3 pillars to body kindness, and they're really simple: love, connect, and care. So love it's make choices from a place of love. And they're not always the choices like when we want to stay up and watch TV, but we know we need our sleep. That going to bed is a choice from a place of love. You're choosing sleep, but you're also going to be sad because you don't get to watch that show you really want to watch right now. And so
that was so me too.
Yeah, I know, right? So that could be one example of like, you're making a choice from a place of love, but maybe in that moment, it also kind of feels a little bit sad or disappointing, right? And then connect is literally connect to your body. It's exactly what you said. It's about building body trust. Your body is wise. We all have an inner caregiver. It's a voice inside of us that truly knows what it means to be good to ourselves or is willing to explore that with you. But we can't hear the inner caregiver because our inner critic is the strongest thought bully that lives in our mind,
Totally.
Put in there by our culture. And then care is about fully committing to taking good care of yourself. So that's regardless of the critic's thoughts, regardless of what's going on in your life right now, that it's okay to even be in a bad place. Like, okay, I listened to the podcast. I started reading Body Kindness and I said I was going to work out 3 days this week and I worked out 0. I suck. Forget it. And, like I'm never going to do this thing. Like I would say absolutely not. I would say that body kindness is about being fully committed to sitting with that feeling of I had this intention to move and I didn't make it happen. And instead of being like, and you're never going to succeed at exercise and all that shame and blame that puts you down that spiral, you say, self-compassion. And that's literally, I recommend you put your hands to your chest and you take a deep breath in, but feel that body connection and say, it's okay to be here right now. It's okay that exercise fell off the priorities. You still care about building this pattern and you will get there. Let's think about how we can learn and grow from that experience this week. And that skill of self-compassion and it's okay is what is going to kill perfectionism. It's going to kill the inner critic. And it's how that caregiver voice behaves. And it can all be learned. That's what's beautiful. It can all be learned. And that it's that third pillar of no matter what, even when you feel like it's impossible, to stay fully committed to your well-being, and you're practicing body kindness. You're doing it.
And the beautiful thing, as you're saying, is you can learn it. And as you're learning it, your child is learning it too. And so you're really changing things for the generation, kind of how you started with your story of breaking the chain, is as you shift and morph, you're actually making changes for the next generation. And even if it's just within your household, that's a huge shift that we have not experienced so far.
Oh, 100%. And not only do I want to validate for you with like 100 exclamation points after that 100%, but there's actually research that shows that. And it was fascinating to me. It's still my favorite study of 2018, but it's called the Intergenerational Transmission of Parent Encouragement to Diet. Basically, what they found is that they're able to track at least dieting to pass down 3 generations. So basically, my parent, theoretically, according to this research, my parent encouragement to diet is passed on to my kids, right? And what they mostly show is that it has to do with that break the chain that I talked about in the beginning, right? The idea of that it's passed down. And so we can take action through the modeling we do around our kids. And that includes, don't weigh yourself. Oh, I'm screwed. I'm never going to be perfectly ready around my kid. Anytime that is a good time to start making these changes, even in the womb, even when they're newborn, because you'll notice how you'll talk to yourself and you'll practice body kindness and compassion instead. But absolutely, as they age in age appropriate ways, it's how, when they start noticing their body, both my girls were somewhere between 3 and 4. The first time I heard the word fat come out of their mouths, and it was in direction of their body. It was not in a negative tone.
Oh, wow. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Young. I know. It was not in a negative tone at all.
Right. Because they don't know at that age.
Exactly. Hopefully. Thank goodness mine didn't. Somebody else's may. But, you take those opportunities. And this is an area I'm fascinated in helping women really try to figure this out, because I feel like we're so lacking that knowledge on how do you heal, especially with like, what do you do in that situation? Because most parents would probably say, oh, you say, oh, honey, you're not fat. And I see that as a mistake. I don't blame people if they've done that, but I see that as a mistake, because there's so much more beauty to kind of, this is what I did. And I was scared, trust me, my heart was beating, but, but I said, oh, are you noticing, that your body, it, has fat, tell me about that. And they would talk about squishiness. And I was like, oh, like silly squishy, and I kept their tone and modeled along with it. And I just added in, that's so interesting for you to notice that. And honey, I just want you to know that there's nothing wrong with fat. And so just that difference, that tone, that exploring with curiosity on their age level, modeling and mimicking what they were giving me, right? And supporting this body connection in what they were noticing in a neutral way, but then adding in this gentle message of there's nothing wrong with fat, not just fat that's on your body, but just as they get older and down the road and they notice other people and might say fat, I can then also reinforce and there's nothing wrong with fat. And that might be a different level of a conversation based on their developmental readiness. But it's this idea that we have got to figure this stuff out to the best of our abilities on how do we create a world that is inclusive for people of all sizes, that allows us to respect our own bodies and others, and that we're not going to single-handedly, right, fix that culture that I talked about in the very beginning, but we're going to take meaningful action where we can. And as you said in the very beginning, it starts with our own body kindness practice and with the things that we can do in the home.
Absolutely. That story that you shared about your daughters really resonates because we did the very same thing with my son, about the same age too. He didn't have any judgment related to it, but he was using that word fat. And we were really mindful of, okay, what do we want to teach him about that word? Because we want to take the emotional charge out of it. And we don't want it to be a word of judgment, but to be a word like, yes, you have a nose. Yes, you have hair. And yes, you have fat. And we all do. And how can we talk about it in a way that's gentle? I can't say that I've done it perfectly. I'll be really honest with you. But that was our intention. That's been our intention so far, is we really want that charge taken out of it, the judgment and the shame that you're talking about so much, that needs to be gone. And I really hear you when you're saying that compassion is such a huge piece of being able to do that. Compassion for yourself, which then ultimately becomes compassion for other people, and that inclusivity of size and shape and all of that. And that leads me to another question that I have, which is on the flip side of what we're talking about, which I mentioned at the top, that my postpartum experience was very different than typical, in that because I delivered so preterm, within 2 weeks of delivery, you could never tell that I'd been pregnant. I was back into my pre-pregnancy clothes, and there was just no evidence of that pregnancy whatsoever, which was a very deep sentiment of grief for me, that not only did the pregnancy end so early, but now there is no impact of it. And I actually wanted something. I wanted a little bit of weight, or I wanted like stretch marks or something to show that this had happened because it had ended so early. And as I kind of come into this world and have met so many more women like me who delivered so preterm, or were not able to breastfeed or do all the things that they'd wanted to do postpartum, the same kind of experience is still coming up. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of feeling like I'm broken. I'm not doing what my body's supposed to do, even though typically you hear my body's not coming back down to size. In this particular community, it's, well, my body's not, it didn't change enough, or it's not doing what it's supposed to now that I have this baby, or now that I've delivered, or that I had been pregnant before. But the end result is still the same, is there's so much shame, and there's so much of that comparison going, how come you can do that and I can't do that? Or how come you look like that and I can't do that? And I'd love for you to share a little bit, if you can, about a message to those listeners who are listening in and feeling like their bodies have failed them from that perspective.
That's such a great question. I'm sitting here just thinking about, on my Body Kindness podcast, I did a whole series of body betrayal stories, and they started out by reading a letter like to their body, and just like the crying and the healing and all the stuff. It was just so powerful. And so that's why I want to start the answer by saying that what I would say to the listener who's going through that is that your feelings are real and they are valid. and nobody should try to judge you for having those feelings. And the most important thing is to start with getting them out, like letting yourself feel the feel. So if you need to get angry, if you need to get sad, if you need to process your negative emotions, that's a gift. And let yourself feel that. I really love expressive writing. The simplest way you can do it is give yourself at least 15 minutes. I don't know what it is about our brains, but around 14 minutes and 30 seconds, the truth comes out. And all of a sudden, you finally get to, oh, I see, this is what it is. And so you could just, stop and do something like that, just to allow space and presence for how you are feeling. So much of what we do that's self-sabotage around food or exercise or, shaming ourselves in our mind, or even, drinking too much alcohol to like numb. I mean, we could do all of that. And it has to do with not wanting to feel our pain. And my first instinct was to jump in with the answer of like, start with acceptance, but that's actually not true. Acceptance will come, but first you need to feel your feels and know that it's valid. I have a client right now who I'm working with who, through one of her pregnancies, had a uterine prolapse, and her whole identity as an exerciser has changed. And she's got these very complicated emotions of feeling body betrayal, wanting to exercise more, but also avoiding trying different things that could work, because like that she could tolerate without the pain, and then add and build some strength, because she's scared of, well, what happens if she goes on the bike for 5 minutes and she's sore? Then that's another thing that she can't do. And so that whole experience she's going through is actually a form of trauma. And trauma is something that needs time and attention. It may need mental health therapy with a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm a dietitian and an exercise physiologist. So I can help with people around thoughts and feelings and how that might impact their choices. But if that is a part of anybody's birth story, I have another friend who almost died giving birth. And so these are all real experiences that need to be felt and validated and lived. And when you do that first, then move on to acceptance and just say, no matter what, it's okay. It's okay to be here right now. It's okay to have all these problems. It's okay to wish things were different. That is a very important part of your healing, because when those things can have a space to exist, then you really dramatically not just process your pain and feel a sense of healing, but you also reduce your need to like cut and run from what you're most afraid of. And then the third thing would be to start to think about your values. And this is just start with this sentence: I want to be the kind of person who, and just fill in those blanks. So it's about meaningful action. So with everything you have going on in your life right now, talk about a meaningful action around how you speak to yourself. Like, I want to be the kind of person who speaks to herself more kindly. And so then you might set goals for noticing negative thoughts and working on a reframe for them. Or I want to be the kind of person who finds, peace or joy in any length of exercise. So then you might actually work on allowing, 10-minute dance parties with your kids being viewed as adequate movement, instead of like, that sucks because you didn't do the really hard thing today. And, but you're identifying these values, and then you're setting goals that are aligned with them. And this is the structure. This is the structure where you change your mindset on what it means for you to take care of your body. And as you do that, it really starts to shift. It's like light bulbs, like, oh yeah, I don't need, these external rewards or consequences or these diet plans, like I can do these things through choices that align with my values. And so, suddenly it's like, I'm not going to beat myself up when we have pizza night with the family. And I'm not going to say, oh, well, it's pizza night, so just, you can't think about nutrition at all, right? It might look like, what do we want to enjoy for pizza? That sounds good. You know what? We've got this or that fruit that we need to use up. Let's cut that up. Here's some fruit salad. You know what? I don't really have stuff for a veggie salad, but we've got some baby carrots and hummus. Here they go. And then anyone on the table can choose how they want to put their plate together. And you might eat, a piece of pizza with some fruit and some veggies and hummus. You might eat all pizza and look at the fruit and say, nope, not today. It's the fact that neither one of those are morally good or bad, that you can connect to your body and eat mindfully and feel good about your choices and stop when you feel comfortably full, and that's so, so different from pretty much any plan out there would say just smelling a piece of pizza is bad for you. But that's not real life, it's just not real. Yeah. I mean, if you have a food allergy or an intolerance, again, that's a body betrayal thing too, right? I have clients who have very significant food allergies. And so you can work your way through that. But assuming you don't have a food allergy or intolerance, you should be able to eat anything you like. It's just the context of what, when, how much, and why, and these beautiful things that you can figure out. You don't need that plan that says, oh, you need to eat. You don't need to have that plan that says you need to eat cottage cheese at 11:30 with a peach.
Right. And then you're scarfing it down going, ugh, I don't want this at all right now. Yeah.
No. Right. Oh, I know. And I was the biggest chronic dieter. I remember training for a marathon and doing South Beach, and it was like all I wanted were strawberries, but I'd eat the whole thing of ricotta cheese. I mean, it was ridiculous. Even when I, was like, something has to change. That was one of my diet rock bottom moments. I was like, you counsel clients to eat carbohydrates when they run, and you're sitting here thinking you'll be a better runner if you lose weight. I was like, there's something wrong with this picture. And I was a dietitian. I was not always the kind of dietitian that did this stuff. It was a personal evolution. And now it is simply the way to be. I just want people to want them to do what they think is right for them. And if body peace makes sense, you just got to kind of start somewhere and let yourself evolve into it. And it's not easy in this culture, but I mean, man, is it really worth it? It's really worth it.
Absolutely. And it just goes back to what you were talking about earlier, that it's worth it for you. It's worth it for you in the long run. And you're making changes to your family by doing this too. And I hear you as you're talking about it, that it really puts you back in control to make choices. You no longer feel like you're boxed in by messages or diets or rules or restrictions, but really what is most important to me. And I can see that really translates beautifully to not just dieting, but self-care in general, your whole postpartum experience in general. How do I want to feel? How do I want to experience this moment or this phase of life? And then making the choices that allow for that to happen. And when you make that choice, it becomes yours. And those actions that follow really are in line with exactly what you want. And what a beautiful way to live, no matter what brought you to this point right now. What a beautiful way to live, to say, this is what I want, and then make that happen.
Yeah. And not expecting perfectionism, in any way where you've adapted to the messiness of how your child behaves, embrace that messiness. I think another positive mindset that really shifted for me was just, I used to think that all stress was bad, stress is going to kill you. It's oh my gosh, because I would actually just add to more stress in my life. But when I learned, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, but when I learned to reframe stress as energy and information to help guide you, and that really the qualities of a person who can build resilience to stress is this mindset of, I can handle it, right? And so if you think of all the times your thought bully tells you, you can't handle this, you're never going to do it. And just if you could say, okay, this is a challenge and this is difficult. I can handle this. What's the next best step for me? What's the next best decision for me? That actually really helps you build this better life and, really repair your relationship with yourself, because you have a different way of thinking and living and being in the world. And, and no matter where your body ends up, right? If culture hasn't caught up and you're still dealing with the oppressions of our society, I think that it's doing what you can to have a better, more meaningful life can also be enough while we, just completely, put our middle fingers up to the message that we're not good enough. It's no, I'm not going to tolerate that. This is what I want to cultivate for my life now. I want to cultivate this kindness and this compassion. I want to cultivate this acceptance, even when it's hard, and it's important to say that because I think it's the other myth that people believe is that once they start embracing and practicing body kindness, that they'll never have a negative body thought again, or they'll never have a bad moment. And that happens all the time. In fact, the only thing I really notice is that like what I can do with it now is just say, what else is going on in my life? Because I know my body has not changed in 24 hours, right? So it's like, what else is going on with my life? And sure enough, it's just some other negative energy elsewhere that is really bothering me. And that one of the ways of coping is just judgment. And then when I notice that I'm in that mindset, I think about my values and I, redirect myself with compassion to live my values.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it's really powerful. It's so much of the crux of the work that I do as well for my clients. And so it really resonates for me. And I know it's resonating with our listeners too. And it's very actionable. It's very practical. You're not saying, okay, we're going to revamp and rehaul your entire life and throw everything out and let's start over. I mean, that's just overwhelming and it doesn't work and nobody's going to do it. Right. So this is very, very practical and very accessible, which I love. You're conducting research in this area, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that and how women can participate?
Absolutely. So I was approached several months ago by a research lab at UNC Charlotte, and they study mindfulness and positive psychology and body image. And they have a strong emphasis in helping to improve the lives of marginalized people. So this would be people of color, people with living in poverty. And so what they wanted to do was look at how we could use body kindness as a philosophy of a way for helping people help themselves regardless of the amount of disposable income they have. It's kind of like you would think that the healthy thing to do is buy the $10 pressed juice. And it's like, that's not accessible to a lot of people. And so anyway, long story short, what we're doing right now is we're surveying readers, and we do have free electronic copies of the book available. It's kind of like a first come, first serve situation. So you can actually download the book, the ebook, read it, and then complete the survey. And that's at bodykindnessbook.com/research. And the only criteria is that you're either currently pregnant or you're postpartum up to 5 years. So we have a decent window for that. And also based in the US, and that has to do with like international laws for email. It's like an IRB approval, like a research approval thing.
I remember those days.
It's not that we're trying to exclude people. But anyway, long story short, we need literally hundreds of women to do this. And so if that's a listener, please consider doing it. As long as you have the interest in reading the book and the time available to complete the survey. It's a one-time short survey. And then actually afterwards, you'll get a link to a free e-kit from me called Body Kindness After Baby. And I give you a video and these resources that you can use that kind of intersects body kindness with postpartum. So if any of that sounds exciting to you, do it yourself or spread the word. We literally need hundreds of women to do this research project. And so if it's anything at all that's not going to add a significant amount of stress to your life, please do it because we would love your feedback. And again, that's bodykindnessbook.com/research. And you can get all the information you need from there.
Yeah. And that link will be in the show notes below. So for those of you that are listening, if you can't type it in right now, don't worry about it. It's going to be in the show notes. You can just click right over to that page and get all the information that you need. For those of you that are listening, I hope the thing that you're taking away from this today is that you do get to decide how you experience this phase of life. I know it's hard when you have all these messages around you and all these expectations of how things were going to go or how they are going. And so much judgment that we have grown up with that's just chirping in our heads that somehow seems to get louder when there's a baby around. But you get to choose. You get to decide. You get to decide. Rebecca, what are your final words of hope for women who are listening in today who are struggling with body image, body kindness, and are looking for a way to turn this around?
I think I just want to say that you were worthy and good just for being born, and that any pain that you have experienced in your life is real and valid, and it's okay to feel that pain, and it's also okay to get better. And I hope that you can find something helpful in our conversation and use that as your first step and your starting point to give yourself what you need to evolve and to get better and create that better life for yourself.
Oh my goodness, I have chills. That is so beautiful and so necessary to hear. I hope all of you just let that sink in and take that home with you today. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Where can people find you if they want to know more about what you do, they want to become a client with you, or anything about you? Where can they find you?
Go to bodykindnessbook.com, and all my social and everything is there. And you can reach out to me on social media as well. But I would love to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, this was incredible. I mean, I feel like stronger and taller and just so much better just having had this conversation. I hope you do too, because it's a message we need more of. I have been in the trenches of feeling like a complete failure on all levels all at the same time. I have been there. But to hear from her, somebody who's been there too, and also a professional in the field, that we do get to choose how we experience this phase of life. We get to choose to tune out all those messages and to tune out and turn off that awful, awful inner critic that seems to convince us all the time that it's right when it's rarely ever so. We get to choose, and what a difference that's going to make for the rest of our life and the future generation that we're trying to build. Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you can head over to Apple Podcasts by iTunes and leave a review so more women who are trying to heal postpartum after whatever has happened to get you to this point can tune into Delivering Miracles and receive the advice, the motivation, the tips, and inspiration that we have on this show to help them get through it. And if you are experiencing pregnancy complications right now, I would love for you to check out Pregnancy Brain, a mind-body approach to stress management during a high-risk pregnancy, because you are in control. And the book shows you how. Helps you manage your complications, helps you manage your stress, and helps you regain that control and that confidence and trust in your body that you need to help bring this baby into the world. You can head over to parijatdeshpande.com and click on book, or go to pregnancybrainbook.com. Also, I'd love to stay in touch. So come by Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, or Facebook at Parijat Desh, Parijatdesh, and say hi. I'd love to meet you. Creating a family is so much more complicated than I ever thought it would be in so many ways. And maybe you do too. But when we hear a message like this today, that we get to choose how we experience it, no matter what life's throwing at us, we still have a voice. We still get to choose. We get to decide. It all just feels a lot more possible to get through. And I know you can. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.